Before we jump into this podcast, let's just have a first word from our sponsors, NordVPN, the fastest VPN in the world and an absolute essential travelling companion. You can use NordVPN on 10 devices with just one account, easily switching your virtual location to access apps and websites in other countries. But if you're out of the country, make sure that you've got NordVPN to be able to use your subscriptions and watch the live sport that you might miss. If you're at home, use it to see if you can save money with products that might be cheaper in another region. Go to nordvpn.com/Manchester to get 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. The link is also in the podcast description. Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. We're recording this episode on Friday morning, ahead of United's game against Chelsea on Saturday evening at Old Trafford. I am joined by Samuel Luckhurst. Samuel, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you, Stephen. I know.
You sound very enthusiastic there.
Well, read into that what you will, but yeah, I suppose I'm a little bit chirpier than you after last night's result. Unfortunately,
it might be mentioned a bit because Rashford scored. Yep, 2 brilliant goals. We'll come into that, but we'll just start with some news stuff first before moving on, and then giving our thoughts ahead of the game this weekend. We'll start with your story this morning, Samuel, that United's players are frustrated by what they feel is a missed opportunity at the start of this season. Do you want to just expand a little bit on that?
I suppose so. Yeah, I mean, it's having spoken to some of the players on the record and spoken to the players at the club, and I think everybody could gauge from the tour it was upbeat, it was positive. There was a very bullish mood, to say the least. The harmony was good, and that has dissipated very, very quickly to the point that the club have spiraled already. I mean, I suppose the spiral started in August with the Grimsby Town defeat, because of just how astonishingly bad they were that evening, and the humiliation of going out to a 4th tier team, and they've not quite recovered from that. I think strangely the mood started to sour in a game where they didn't lose, which was Fulham away. I got the sense from speaking to a lot of friends who were in the away end and seeing the away end that day and how they reacted to some of the decisions that Amorim made, that they just weren't having it, particularly to put in 2 defenders on when they're chanting attack, attack, attack. It almost felt like a contrary call by Amorim, but that was the sense I got. And then, of course, where they lost to City, I think they were particularly disappointed and I think the mood's been quite somber from what I've been told post City, purely because not only did they lose, but they feel as though they lost to a City side, quite rightly, that were not at their optimum, that didn't really have to operate at a high level to beat United. It was strange how, watching City, it was almost like City were rolling back the years, and those years weren't exactly 10 or 15 years ago. They were more like 2 or 3 years ago when they were in their pomp and they'd won four titles on the spin. That's how quickly eras can be separated. Last season, obviously, I think people see it as that City going in decline. Maybe that was just the one season, but it is a very different squad now. And I think really the mood at United, and certainly in the dressing room, is quite sobering for them, that they went to the Etihad. They felt like they had a decent chance of getting a win or getting something positive against a City team that had lost 2 games on the spin. And then they ended up getting battered 3-0 by, as I said, a City team that were not that good. And I think that's from what I gather, that's the feeling in the United dressing room as well. They didn't feel as though City were the City that battered them 6-3 a few years ago, or 4-1 when Ralph Rangnick was in charge, or there was that time in one of Jose Mourinho's final games where Raheem Sterling was taking the mickey in the corner flag, and City won 3-1. One of Solskjaer's final games at Old Trafford, City only won 2-0, but it was almost as if they kept the scoreline down that day to ensure that Solskjaer stayed in the job, and he did. And happily for City, United then got trounced 4-1 at Watford 2 weeks later. And that day, United had more attempts on target at their own goal than at City's goal. It really was a 2-0 thrashing, that defeat. But that was a very different City. And yet the current guys under the current side under Guardiola that they've assembled and spent a lot of money again this year, which doesn't it's got some world-class players in it. It's got some brilliant players in it, but it's not got that fear factor that his first City sides had, and they still pretty much demolished United last week.
Yeah, it's not been a very good start. We discussed the statistics on the last podcast earlier in the week. There's some brutal stats that have come out. Amorim really needed a fast start after overseeing the worst season at the club for 51 years, but it's been the worst start of a season for 33. Having said that, though, Samuel, we're only 4 games into the Premier League season. And when you look at the table, Bournemouth, Tottenham, they're both on 9 points. Arsenal, in fact, are on 9 points as well. So United are, 5 points adrift? I know it's harder to be further apart when there's only been a few games, but it is very salvageable, isn't it? There is still time to turn it around. I will caveat that point with Amorim is yet to win back-to-back Premier League games since he arrived at the club. So that's obviously very concerning.
There are 34 games left. It is very much in its infancy, but the trouble is we're very familiar with covering United managers who go past the point of no return, and that's the fear. That's certainly my feeling with Amorim. I think he has passed that point now, and that's why we're talking and writing about him in these terms, and we're using phrases like that the pressure is building. The pressure is always on a Manchester United manager, but football is a very, very simple game. It's not complicated whatsoever. He has to start winning matches. And I was asked, I think it was after the Fulham game, a friend said, do you think that they'll give him the season? And I said, no. If results do not pick up, there's no way he's getting as much time as he had last season. You just can't do it. You can't afford to go through a season. I mean, at the moment, they're on a sequence of 1 win in 4 games. If that's their average, if that's going to be par for the course for Amorim's forthcoming months, he's not going to see out the season. No chance whatsoever. If you're losing 2 games in banks of 4, or looking at this pattern of defeat, not a defeat, not a defeat, defeat, if that continues, or something remotely akin to that, he's not going to survive. And the relevant comparison that will come up just after the October internationals, if he is still in charge, will of course be how does his record stack up against Ten Hag last season, because Ten Hag was in charge for the first 9 Premier League games, and then he was gone, and he was gone the day after probably the most luckless defeat of the lot, maybe the most luckless defeat of his entire time at United. That United were absolutely dominant against a dreadful West Ham team in that first half, couldn't score, and then ended up losing to an atrocious penalty decision by a referee who's not even refereeing anymore for very different reasons, David Coote, because he took the advice of that grandstanding official from your neck of the woods in the northeast on VAR, who I won't give any publicity, and decided to give a penalty against Matthias de Ligt for a non-foul on Danny Ings. But nevertheless, Ten Hag should have gone in the summer. And it was interesting, actually, and quite eye-opening that when a lot of water was passed under the bridge, you speak to people who were staunchly defensive of Ten Hag. You speak to them now, and one person who's particularly close to him, they said, look, he absolutely should have gone after the FA Cup final. And I don't know if he meant he should have been sacked or he should have walked, but he just meant that should have been his final game. And we said that at the time. And I think the majority of journalists felt that. There were 1 or 2 who felt that United should have kept by him, but it was fan power. And that was an example of why fans really shouldn't run football clubs, because there is too much emotion attached to it. I'm certainly not football clubs at that level anyway. But Amorim has not got any of that goodwill to fall back on. Ten Hag did have that goodwill to fall back on, because he did, as he never tired of reminding us, he did win 2 trophies, and there aren't a lot of Manchester United managers that have actually done that. They've won 2 separate trophies during their time at the club. And Amorim missed his chance in Bilbao back in May. And it's strange, because you look at that final and you think maybe not his fate was sealed there as such, but that clearly has not helped, because already it feels like these midweeks without European football, what could or should have been an advantage. United, of course, it has to be United do this. They are turning it into a disadvantage where the wait between games is longer. The bad mood can sour even more. You've not got that midweek match to try and regain confidence and then channel it into the weekend fixture. And unfortunately, it doesn't surprise me because United, if they can find a way of making a pig's ear out of something, they will find a way to do it. And Amorim did touch upon it a few weeks ago when he said, like, with some of the players, it's almost like they think there's something in the food here, talking about Carrington, or something in the water here, as if the place is cursed. And it's nothing like that at all. I look at it. I look at some of the things United do at times. I think it is not this difficult. You look at Nottingham Forest last season; they had their best season in 30 years because they signed a good, dependable goalkeeper, and they signed a striker who could score goals and did score goals consistently. You look at United this year; they've not got a number one goalkeeper. They've just got 3 number 2 goalkeepers, and they've signed a striker who's unproven, hasn't scored in his first 5 Premier League games. Five games in domestic football in England. And it shouldn't be that difficult. Yet this is a club that has spent £250 million this calendar year. So you can't cut them any slack whatsoever. And I look, the last thing we need, just from a job perspective, a selfish perspective, is a manager's sacking to be writing up at this time of the year, and then a new manager comes in and what's he changed, and oh, that's wonderful, that sounds great, and yeah, by the end of it, they'll have tired of these methods. They'll hate these methods because he'll have got on their nerves and he won't have won anything. It's in all of our interests for Ruben Amorim to be a success at United, and I hope he is, for just from a selfish perspective. And also, I think he's a good guy. I think he's a likable guy. I think he's a good coach. But I must admit, when I was told on Monday afternoon that one of the Benfica presidential candidates was talking about was talking about the possibility of trying to lure Amorim back to Lisbon, I did think that's something that maybe it's in the interests of all parties for that to happen, for Amorim, for his wife, for his family, to go back to Lisbon, to go back to Portugal and to take over a big club. But of course, it's another Portuguese manager who's had a time at United, who's now in charge of Benfica.
And who's that?
Well, it's the guy whose signature is scrawled behind me on who's immortalised on my wall.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it? You've described the process when we're kind of coming to the end game with United managers, and part of that is former players and club legends coming out and speaking against the manager. And this week we've seen quotes on Wayne Rooney, Paul Scholes, Brian Robson as well, and Peter Schmeichel. Scholes and Robson have questioned his handling of Manu. Schmeichel's questioned the system and his quotes in press conferences. It does kind of have that feel about it, doesn't it, at the moment, this week, especially after that defeat against City?
It's amazing how vocal former players can be when they're no longer paid ambassadors as well, isn't it?
I thought that when I saw the Brian Robson quote straight away,
Peter Schmeichel was a casual ambassador, so I don't think he necessarily had to toe the party line all the time, but he has. I mean, he's been pretty sycophantic towards United, wearing a United tie to certain. I think it was to Kath Phipps's funeral earlier in the year. Like he's desperate to try and expunge from memory his cartwheeling in Manchester City colours during the last Main Road derby. But this is an occupational hazard for Manchester United manager. Louis van Gaal referenced it several years ago. He said about former players yapping. And it started under David Moyes, but they went easy on Moyes because, let's face it, their mates were working at the club. You had Phil Neville and Ryan Giggs on the coaching staff. And I think Gary Neville started to get, I think he actually got quite a bit of stick that season for not going in hard enough on Moyes, because it was as if he was compromised by the fact that his sibling was a club employee and one of his longest friends and fellow business associate as well, going off all the stuff at Salford City, and a former teammate. Like, the association could hardly have been tighter. They were both working for the club, And I remember Neville saying not too long ago that there was only one occasion where Sir Alex Ferguson pulled him up on some of his punditry, and it was when he despaired over a mistake that David De Gea made against Tottenham in Ferguson's final season. And I remember his analysis of it. It was quite memorable, because I think De Gea had come for a ball. It was a meek punch, went to Aaron Lennon. Aaron Lennon steered it across to, I'm pretty sure it might have been Clint Dempsey, who got a very late equaliser. And Neville froze it after the goal went in. And all these United players were just looking at De Gea. And I think Neville it was quite a good phrase of something like he's not looking at him because he fancies him. He's looking at him because he thinks and knows he's at fault for a goal. And I think Ferguson felt as though he'd gone overboard a little bit with that. But since Van Gaal's come in, it pretty much open season gets declared quite almost gleefully, really, by some former players. And yes, some of them have got a bit of an axe to grind, or there is an ulterior motive there. But ultimately, it is because they came through the club when it was very successful, when the standards were higher, when the mentality was stronger, when if you finished second and trophyless, it was undeniably an unsuccessful season. And what they see in front of them is anathema to them. And it's been going on for a long, long time. So they say it from a point of caring. But if you're a United manager, you must be absolutely, I think what maybe helps in a way is that it's gone beyond the saturation point of ex-United players having their say on United. The BBC are obviously paying Rooney a hell of a lot of money to be a pundit. I think he's a brilliant pundit, by the way, on Match of the Day, and do a podcast. And he's doing a podcast, it feels like 3 or 4 times a week, with some guy I've never heard of, and Kelly Summers, who's obviously a very experienced host, and he will say anything about United. It doesn't matter to him. Yes, he's lads in the academy, but I don't think he's the kind of character who's going to worry about ruffling some feathers there. And it's a different dynamic. His lad will do as well as he can for the United academy, and I don't think he's going to be penalised depending on what his dad says about the first team. And his dad's certainly not someone to sugarcoat it either. Everyone knows the way he speaks. He's very forthright. He's very honest, and he's as I said, I think he's a terrific pundit. And certainly when he used to do his columns that were ghostwritten masterfully by Jonathan Northcroft in the Sunday Times, they were great columns. And I think the football columnist, it's almost becoming somewhat outdated just because of the way the industry is going. But those columns, when Rooney was doing them regularly, were well worth reading. I think there are other former players whose views, the weight that they carry, it's diminished. I think Roy Keane, he used to be a reluctant pundit, and when he made sporadic appearances, he was a lot more effective with his analysis. Now it feels like he's doing certain things that are scripted, and Sky want a viral clip. They want X amount of viral clips. They've got this target for them. So, Micah, can you say this? Roy, can you say this? It doesn't feel very natural. I think Gary Neville is different to that. He will come in because of the way he's done commentary. And I know there's some United fans who don't particularly care for Neville as much as they used to, but I still think he's one of the most erudite pundits around. Rio Ferdinand, I can't say I've ever listened to one of his podcasts, and I don't necessarily think that his commentary is missed on TNT. But then you've got this.
You don't miss Rio Ferdinand shouting on TNT.
I really wish whether it's TNT or MUTV, they put a video out of the Maguire goal against Lyon without commentary, so you could just hear the crowd. Because that's the problem with, if you want to watch highlights from that game, you've got some of the worst commentary over it. It's not Clive Tilsley and Ron Atkinson and Camp Nou in 1999. So, that's for certain. But of course, Rio Ferdinand's moved to Dubai. Maybe he's not as prominent as he used to be, but you've got Paul Scholes and Nicky Butt continuing with a podcast that they started last year. And again, some United fans cannot get enough of United coverage. They'll listen to this podcast. They'll listen to other media outlets, United podcasts. They'll listen to Gary Neville and Roy Keane after the game on Sunday. They'll listen to Butt and Scholes. They'll listen to Ferdinand. there is clearly a market for it, even though it's gone well beyond the saturation point. It's difficult to pinpoint a former United player who doesn't have something to say about the club. But I think what I'd like to think with us as journalists is our opinions. It's a different form of opinion. It's more of an informed opinion. We're actually, we are going to the games. We're going on pre-season tours. We're seeing a lot. We're reflecting a lot of background, a lot of nuance that's going into our opinions. But absolutely, I mean, I called certain defeats, and Arsenal absolutely was not one of these. But there are certain defeats United have where I kind of like refer to it as it's an open season defeat. You declare open season and you give them both barrels. And Sunday was probably, if you lose 3-0 in a derby, and this was a good point that Keane made, in fairness to him. He said it's not like they look absolutely despondent or grief-stricken to have lost it. I didn't realise there hadn't been a booking in the game. And that's a worry just for the Manchester derby as a whole. It's not just a worry for United. I thought the atmosphere was dreadful at the Etihad. I sincerely hope it's a lot better at Old Trafford in January. But you've got this danger now, I think, certainly with football and with the how match goers are changing and the makeup of match goers is changing. And I go back to that Haaland celebration against Real Madrid at the Etihad last year. He goes off to a corner, and some people thought it was maybe the Real Madrid fans there, because the reaction to him scoring for Manchester City in a knockout tie against Real Madrid in the Champions League was extraordinarily passive. But it wasn't. It was just because you've got a very different type of fan who will get in at Manchester City these days. And we saw last week there were some City fans who wanted a selfie with the new Manchester United goalkeeper. And I don't care what generation you hail from, that's not for me. The stewards should have been turfing them out over that.
You just reminded us down in the mix zone in the Etihad, a United player. There was a City player who was conducting an interview, and his fellow countryman who represents United gave him a little cuddle on the shoulder as he walked out. And I thought, I'm not going to name him, but
you can name him because Paul Hurst has written about him.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, it was Xerxes and Rangers.
Xerxes,
and if Roy Keane had seen that moment, he would have had something to say, wouldn't he? He definitely would have had something to say. We'll move on to.
Sorry, name and shame them in the future, Stephen. Name and shame them in the future. After a defeat like that, anything goes.
Let's touch on Rashford's performance in the Champions League very briefly, because he scored 2 goals. The first was a very good header. The second was a rocket from the edge of the box, a fantastic strike. You made the point before we came on air. It was a very different performance to Rashford's last appearance at St James's Park up in the northeast, because he came off after an hour, didn't he? Was it in December 2023? Was it the 1-0? And he was very poor. But a change of scenery looks to have sparked something with Rashford, as was probably expected. And I'll mention his Instagram post, Samuel, because I doubt you've seen this because you're a busy man and you've got 2 children. But I noticed it this morning. Bruno Fernandes has commented on his Instagram with a GIF. And it's a GIF of Rashford with a quote. And it says, "If you're not taking risks, you're doing something wrong." And I think Fernandes uploaded a story of watching Rashford. I mean, I'd suggest it's just a friend commented on a friend's Instagram, but some people have obviously suggested that it might have other implications. What do you think? I'm asking you what you think, but as I say, you've probably not seen it, have you?
I mean, one thing is that I'm actually trying to look for this post now, and I can't.
It's the photo of him in the top. It's the photo, Rashford's post of his celebration in the orange top, with the caption, "Great way to kick off the Champions League."
Great way to kick off the Champions League.
Fernandes' comments at the very top.
For some reason, I can't see Fernandes' comment at the very top. He's definitely not blocked me, because I can see his story, but maybe it's a reply.
Yeah, I mean, it's got 3,000 likes, his comment, so it pops up straight away on my Instagram.
Right. Well, the thing with those posts is that it's very, very clear that Rashford doesn't do his own social media. It's pretty clear that his brother does it for him, to the point that his brother accidentally tweeted something that was meant for his agency's account, but did it from Rashford's account. Then the agency's Twitter account suddenly closed down and has never reopened. it's not the first time that footballers could be, not getting themselves into trouble, but creating something out of nothing just by idle thumbs and being passive aggressive. Is it? I don't know, but you look at just a cursory glance there. Hoyland's commented on Rashford's post, and Garnacho's commented on Rashford's post. It's his goals, both of them were excellent. I in a way, I sound like a seasoned centre forward here when I absolutely was not and never will be. But I really, in a way, I kind of like his first goal more because his movement is really clever. He gets into the area, he stays central. Koundé is going to cross it with his weaker foot, so he's got an idea of the trajectory of it, so he doesn't get too far ahead of himself, and he just stands off sharp, and then the precision of the header is perfect. Pope was never getting to it, and it was centre forward play from someone who did not want to play as a centre forward for United.
Yeah, we don't
let's
necessarily
face it, he
associate
will
those
have
kinds of goals with him, do we? And Nicky Butt
no,
made that point on the highlight show when he was younger and in
no,
the academy. They really wanted him to get in those positions and score those goals.
yeah. And I'd say during the season when he was playing for a new contract, he did. He took up some really clever positions in games where he'd start on the left and he would just, whether it had been a substitution or not, he would find himself in a great position. Palace at home springs to mind when they won 2-1 on the day that Casemiro got ridiculously sent off. He's in the middle and it's a first time prod, 2-0, no problem. And he had that instinct back then. So we know that he's got it in him. The problem is he always switched on? Is he always going to be professional doing it? Again, I think the key context last night is that I wasn't remotely surprised that he played well at Newcastle because it's a Champions League game. He's starting. It's back in England. Thomas Tuchel is in the stands. It's all the eyes are on me here. I've got a point to prove. His best half for Aston Villa last season was in the second half against Paris Saint-Germain. Again, big Champions League game, a lot of eyes on it, point to prove, and he turns it on. And I think he was substituted and he wasn't even injured at the time. And I remember thinking, what a strange decision that was by Emery to take him off. And I found it strange, Emery's management of Rashford at times last season as well. Not just Rashford, but Ollie Watkins. It felt like those two would be really, really compatible in a front three or a front four. Rashford on the left, Watkins up front. Emery didn't see it that way. And I genuinely think that was to Villa's detriment. And in the end, they had a pretty disastrous end to the season. They bossed it in the FA Cup semi-final and they bossed it at Old Trafford on the final day. But Rashford has got that in him, in that if the occasion suits him, if there's a guy in the stands or if there are more eyeballs on a game, he will turn it on. And he's not the only one. Jadon Sancho's best performance on loan at Dortmund, as we all know, was against Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League semi-final. In that it's a huge knockout game. There are more eyeballs on it in England because it's the big game that night. So everyone's going to be, if you can tune in, you'll tune in. So sometimes these players, they just want to make a point, but then can they back it up on a consistent basis? That's the key, and that'll be the key for Rashford now as well, because he was substituted at half time, wasn't he? In one of his first starts, might have been his first start for Barcelona when they were 2-0 down, and then they ended up winning 3-2 without him on the pitch. So he'll have needed that last night because he's not. I don't think he's exactly set the world alight, but his team are one of these who, like his brother. I mean, his brother. It's, as I said, is the one who does his Instagram, and I think they were celebrating an assist at the weekend. Like he got his first assist. Instagram post about that. I mean, I've no idea how impressive the assist was or unimpressive the assist was, but we're in this era. The Premier League were at it at the weekend, like, oh, Erling Haaland's now got this number of goal involvements. And it's like, Erling Haaland does not need this nonsense stat of goal involvement.
Don't you post on your
gets
story
enough goals?
When we play five-a-side, don't you post when you get an assist?
No.
I'm joking.
Look,
I am joking.
We don't even play five-a-side anymore.
Yeah, the games have stopped for a while.
I've not mentioned it for a while, but when I got the 2 goals at Old Trafford for the press team, did I go looking for the footage of it to upload onto my Instagram account? No, one picture sufficed, and that was it. And it was ancient history apart from me mentioning it on podcasts
I was
every
going to
week
say,
or
yeah.
every other week.
I mean, rightly so. Anyone would.
So look, if you're Rashford, if you want to stay permanently at Barcelona, you've got to be scoring quite regularly and posing the question, because Lewandowski might not be there next season, given his age and given his contract situation. You look at the other options they've got in attack. He maybe only started last night because Lamine Yamal was injured, so he's got to be on his toes. And when he's on his toes, he's a fabulous player, but that was rarely the case in his final. I'd say probably his final 4 years at United in the first team there, apart from that one season where, and people at United even say it as well, that he was playing for a contract. So his performance level has got to be a hell of a lot more consistent. And I think where he is effectively playing for a contract as well at Barcelona, the club that he really wanted to join. Let's face it, he didn't have Aston Villa in mind when he wanted to leave United in January, but Barcelona is absolutely up his street. So he's got incentives aplenty to be turning it on there. So I don't think there are any excuses really if he doesn't perform, because everything is in his favour. He's got the confidence of Tuchel, who's been picking him in squads rather generously, I would say. Barcelona have got him in the building. He's coming up against weaker opponents by and large in La Liga. There's a World Cup in the summer, and if he plays really well for Barcelona, I'm sure they'll come to a point where they feel as though they should sign him permanently. So incentives are plenty. I don't think he should be lacking motivation whatsoever.
Yeah, he really wanted that Barcelona move in January, didn't he? It's interesting when you saw the photos of him at Aston Villa unveil, and he looked like he just rolled out of bed. And you compare that to the Barcelona photos, a very sleek suit, looks smart, looked fantastic, and you spoke well at this press conference.
Looked kempt to me, yeah.
Yeah, clearly made more of an effort. I just wanted to touch on a little bit of academy news briefly, Samuel, before we look ahead to Chelsea. And there's a reason why, and I'll get onto it in a second. I did the story earlier in the week that Alan Wright's expected to join the club. He spent 10 years at City coaching the under-16s, former Premier League footballer, of course, played for Aston Villa. He briefly worked with Travis Binion during their playing careers at Sheffield United, and Binion's understood to be kind of, he's advised him for the role and the driving force behind it. Of course, it's been signed off by Wilcox. But the reason why I wanted to mention it is because there needs to be a conversation now, doesn't there, about how many Manchester or former Manchester City staff members are working at United. If Wright is signed off, you're going to have Barada as the CEO, Jason Wilcox as the director of football, Stephen Torpey, who's coming in to replace Nick Cox, as the academy manager, Sam Erif, who's the performance director, and then Wright would be in the PDP group. So there's at least 5 staff members there who have City on their CVs. They've been at the club for a long time, the other side of Manchester, and now they'll be working at United. It's an interesting point, isn't
it? It is. It's. I mean, Barada's fingertips all over the Wilcox appointment, even though Barada was technically serving gardening leave at City at the time. It was known that he was going to become United's chief executive, but of course Wilcox was able to start sooner than Barada because there was no issue with gardening leave coming from Southampton at all. Look, time will tell whether it works. It's an interesting and possibly precarious time for some of them, because certainly Barada's case, he really did champion going for Amorim, and that has not been working, and it may never work. Looking at the position United are in at the moment, whether it be the league table or their form, and Ratcliffe being Ratcliffe, and how impulsive he can be in other businesses and reacting to bad decisions or failures. Does the buck just stop with the manager? Does it go beyond that? We'll have to wait and see. But Ratcliffe has also nailed his colours to the mast by saying that Jason Wilcox has the best eyes in football, which is a comment that could easily come back to haunt him if United don't have a successful season and if some of the signings that they've made don't pan out. Because again, I think certainly with the goalkeeper and striker, they feel like they're much more aligned with what Wilcox and Barada are trying to do, and this whole data plan, and Ineos not necessarily depending on scouts as much as football clubs or United used to. So if you're going to go down that road, you've got to be right. You better be right about it. And we don't know if they will be right about it. I think we can offer an opinion, of course, and we have offered an opinion on the goalkeeper situation and going for Sesko. I don't think either situation have been handled particularly well. And I'd be pleasantly surprised if United amount to a successful side with Sen Lomans in goal and Benjamin Sesko up front. I think you'd be waiting a fair while for that to happen. And United is not a club where you get time. I mean, Sam Merritt, some of us met him on the tour of the training complex, and when we were showing around Carrington, he was present. One of the architects was present. The architect from Foster and Partners, who's also some of us met in Foster and Partners office in London for the Stadium unveiling. Very, very impressive guy. I think he's called Patrick. Very engaging. Offered great context. Whenever some of us asked Sam Merritt a question, and obviously when you ask someone a question, you're looking at them, and you expect the person you're speaking to look at you. He would just look at the press officer while I'm still talking, essentially saying, "Can you answer this for me?" Which I found quite, I thought that's a bit peculiar for someone who's who's a fellow adult in the room, and this is just, you're just having a conversation here. We're not looking for anything incendiary. We're being shown around this very impressive complex that's been refurbished, that looks great, feels great. Even as a journalist working there, you feel the benefit of it. We get the natural light. It brings out the best in us as well, if it's all possible. The facilities are much more conducive to working there as well. It is genuinely a place that even as a journalist you want to stay longer and work in, rather than just get the hell out of there because we're being kicked out because a sponsor is going to show some fans around the room in a Jimmy Murphy Centre. It's a very different experience now. So it's strange when you're speaking to this person and you're just seeking some extra context, and they just start looking away from you, and you think, am I still talking to you, or can you not hear me? What's the issue here? So time will tell. I think there's, if you're going to go down that route of let's just take this person from City and that person from City, I think there's a point where you think enough is enough. With Berardi already, there are certain people who have worked at United and have dealt with him who feel as though he's a little out of his depth. It's a big step up going from chief football operations officer at City, which is a role where you are a little bit more, you're certainly not front of house, you're more in the background. Colette Roach has occupied that role at United for, I think, 6 or 7 years, and she is quite comfortable in it because the accountability is not on you really. It's on the chief executive. It's on other figureheads at the club who it's the co-chairman or the co-owner, whatever the title may be. Whereas Berardi's gone from that I'm not saying it was an easy role whatsoever at City. He clearly contributed to some of the success they had, but he's gone from there to be in front of house at Manchester United, where the scrutiny is infinitely different. And I don't think anything really can prepare anyone for going in and working at Manchester United. I think we have a unique understanding of it compared to some people who actually work in football and are clearly more talented at what they do. Like, could we run a football club? No. Could we do what Berardi does? No. But there are certain understandings we have, having spent so much time at Old Trafford and at Carrington and following United around, that we can see, we know how one should brace themselves for certain situations or prepare themselves, and how they should conduct themselves when things are going all right, for example. Whereas some people can be maybe a little too emotional, some people can be a little bit in over their head, whatever it may be. But Berardi's a year in, and has it been a successful year? No, it hasn't whatsoever. I mean, it's been pretty disastrous, and where he's championed the appointment of Berardi to the point that it led to the defenestration of the sporting director as well. And the Allies left at two guys Berard and Wilcox, two guys who knew each other from Manchester City, you've really got to back that up. I mean, when you mentioned Alan Wright, I just think of the guy who played at left back for Aston Villa in the 90s, who was one of the smallest left backs I've ever seen as well. I forgot that he'd gone into coaching, but I don't think that it's exactly cause to put up the bunting or anything like that.
Yeah, I think well said. We'll move on then to the game this weekend. United really need to win against Chelsea on Saturday evening. It's a huge match after the poor start of the season. An interesting subplot, of course, is that Alejandro Garnacho is returning to the club. I asked fans on pardon me, on Twitter yesterday what their thoughts were, and provided that was sensible, I'd use them in an article. And it was interesting to kind of hear how they feel, because he's come through the club as an academy graduate. He's won the Youth Cup, scored some very important goals for the first team, including the opening goal in the FA Cup final last year. So some fantastic moments, but on the other side of it, he ended in quite difficult or not ideal circumstances because of his attitude and the way he acted and his deterioration in his relationship with the manager. It was disappointing, wasn't it, Samuel, the way his time at the club ended, because he was such a great player to watch for a long time. And it was brilliant to see a lad who came in, I think, was he 17 when he arrived from Atletico Madrid? And he really felt like a proper United player on the wing. But he was ultimately responsible for the way that ended.
It's regrettable what happened, because he was a throwback to United wingers of yore, and he was also a very modern winger. I do wonder sometimes, was there a bit of too much too young going on? I know he didn't get the number 7 shirt when he wanted it, which was the right thing to do. I don't think it was the right thing to give it to Mason Mount, but United being United, someone has to occupy that number just for selling shirts, really. Let's face it, I don't think the day would ever come where United would start a season without someone wearing the number 7. But you think of that, and I rewatched it earlier ahead of my own piece on Garnacho. It was quite a stirring trailer that Barry Keoghan, Adidas Originals, about the away shirt, and Garnacho is central in that. His celebration against West Ham is, referenced. His overhead kick against Everton is referenced, and at that time he was one of the few untouchables in the squad that United just would not entertain selling or letting go. And of course, that status changed within the space of a year. And for him to have only been at the club for less than 5 years, and his full debut was in October 2022, so that wasn't even 3 years ago. A hell of a lot happened during his time at United, and in Manchester. It was extremely eventful, from arriving as a 16-year-old and having to isolate due to the pandemic, and come the end of it, he was isolated as well for very different reasons. He was a member of the bomb squad. He wasn't on the pre-season tour. His final commitment with United was in May on the post-season tour of Hong Kong and Kuala Lumpur, which he didn't. He felt pretty contemptuous of those commitments, having just been omitted from the squad for the final game against Aston Villa, and then having to trek across to Asia for two matches. But it was interesting to be told that, like, during last season, how often him and his partner, who I think it's safe to say their relationship is on off. It's the mother of his son, but they did travel down to London quite frequently. And I think he was probably warming up for a move to Chelsea, dating back to the start of the year, when his two agents were rather brazenly at Stamford Bridge. I think Chelsea were quite happy for it to be known that they were interested. I think that was the start of playing the long game. There is a little bit of mischief making that goes on between United and Chelsea regarding transfers, deliberately or not, but it does seem to play out that way. I mean, United suggesting that Chelsea win for Bryan Mbeumo, I felt hard to believe. Chelsea insists that was not the case whatsoever, but Chelsea were also trying to flog any bit of deadwood they had to United, whether it was Nkunku, whether it was Nicholas Jackson. United didn't appreciate that, so wanted that message out as well. And with Garnacho, ultimately, United tried very hard, and maybe it was probably just in their interest to have not been quite as forthright on it or as detailed on it. But they tried to portray his sale as something of a success for £40 million, when, let's face it, Chelsea got him on the cheap. And United said Chelsea started the negotiations at 25 million. Their initial offer was 25 million. I've not spoken to someone at Chelsea or anyone at Chelsea on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea disputed that as well.
They were in a
Ultimately,
difficult
yes,
position, weren't they, Samuel? Because the whole world knew that he needed to leave and that Amorim wanted him to go, and that inevitably damages your bargaining power in negotiations. It's difficult. I mean, with 50 million, he's worth more than 40, obviously, but it is hard for them to get a significantly better fee than that in the circumstances.
yes, but they were at fault for those circumstances. They didn't necessarily have to, have him training away from the first team. And look, I have no problem with what Amorim did, not taking him on tour. I know that was always going to hit his valuation and the final fee, but when you look at the timing of when that fee was agreed, it was in the final days of the transfer window. When you look at his profile, academy graduate, Argentina international, winger, only 21, played in the Premier League for the best part of 3 years, very exciting, got a world-class ceiling. He is not worth £40 million, and United should have been holding out for 50 million minimum. I think if they'd got 50 million, you'd have thought, okay, that's decent, that's good in the
Yeah.
circumstances.
At
He's
least I
been a bit of an
suppose 40
upstart.
with add-ons would have been better than 40 million fixed fee in a sell-on
Yeah,
clause,
and
wouldn't it?
it's not even that. And look, there was always going to come a point where they'd have to compromise, because he just wanted to go to Chelsea, and that made things a hell of a lot easier for Chelsea, rather than, say, like Fulham last year, where they were just making these incremental increases to their bids for Scott McTominay, and then Napoli come in and look, as delightful as Fulham is, and playing at that ground in that part of London, there is something quite captivating about the prospect of playing for Napoli, going to Italy, living in Naples, playing under Antonio Conte, that appealed to McTominay, and I don't blame him for going there, even though it's not necessarily one of the more picturesque cities in Italy. Just the challenge of playing for Napoli in the club of Maradona, that is always that's likely to grab you, and it did grab McTominay, and he was phenomenal there. Whereas Garnacho, it was always just going to be Chelsea, even though the odd other club were being mooted as perhaps as possibly interested. I think when the Emiliano Martinez stuff was going on, it was suggested. And look, swap deals hardly ever happen. I think it's pointless when they even get mentioned as being possible in stories. But if you're Garnacho, why would you want to play for Aston Villa? Frankly, it's not. It's not. I'd argue it's not even a step up. I know you'd be playing in the Europa League this season, possibly, but if you're Garnacho, having had 5 years at Manchester United, and you've accomplished what he accomplished there, which was still a fair amount despite the brief time and a couple of those years being spent in the youth team, you want to be playing, and you quite understandably, he would feel worthy of playing for a Champions League club, and that's what Chelsea are. And Chelsea have got that glamour; they offer that London living, and it's bound to be appealing to a young man who, as I said, was travelling down to London quite frequently last season as well.
There's the possibility that he does get booed this weekend. He hasn't started a game for Chelsea yet, so it might be an appearance from the bench that he'd be limited to. We haven't got the team news, Samuel. We're recording this obviously on Friday morning, as I said. So the press conference is this afternoon. Should we touch on what your midfield selection would be? Because that's been contentious throughout the opening games. Because I'd probably go with Casemiro and Menu in the pivot. You love the word pivot. Tomorrow, and that would mean moving Fernandez up onto the left and having Mbeumo on the right. Kuna could obviously be back from injury, which would be interesting. We'll have to wait and see what Ruben Amorim says later. Ugarte played well at the Etihad in the first half, but I just think Casemiro and Mainoo's understanding. They've got a pretty decent relationship. They showed that when Mainoo broke into the side. And I think they would be my pairing this weekend.
I think the Fernandes debate is really overrated. I saw something the other day, and look, it's not often that I would reference some one of these kind of stats, but he's created the most chances in the Premier League this season, and his form has not been particularly good. It's been more bad than good. But he is a player who can make something happen, however he's performing. And him playing in midfield, I don't think it's as much of a problem as some people think it is. Some people are saying he can't play in that position. You play him in the other position, that's what suits to him as well. This is a player who was playing well last season, in the second half of last season, I should say, in midfield or as one of the two playmakers. And yes, a lot of that form was in European matches, which is absolutely relevant and is context that shouldn't be dismissed. But Manchester United is so light in midfield, and I mean this whole notion that Casemiro is some kind of like this is the second coming of Casemiro, or he's renascent. He is going to be released by them in June. I think people forget that. There is no way, absolutely no way, that they'll be triggering that 1 year extension in his contract. If they do, the people who do it should be carted out of that club immediately.
There's no chance of that, is
there? No. He's going to be released. So banking on him, I think it's just, I think what is the point? Like Ugarte has not looked good enough for United most of the time he's been at the club, but you've invested £15.75 million in him, and that investment was only just over a year ago. You've got to try and make it work there. And that's, if I was Jason Wilcox or if the technical director and you're having those conversations with Amorim, I'd be trying to lean on him without picking his team, but certainly.
But is Amorim not thinking,
you've got to try and make this work?
But if he needs wins now, he's not thinking down the line, right? You got it.
He's not getting wins with Casemiro either, though,
well, I agree. But from a short-term view, they would probably be my preferred midfield pairing for the next 3 games up until the October international break, which it's crunch time, isn't it, really?
I think that is pie in the sky stuff that Amorim could play Mainu and Casemiro in midfield tomorrow. If he does, I will shake your hand on the spot, Steven, and say, Steven.
Well, I could see him starting Casemiro, right. But I don't think he'll start Mainu. I'm saying what I'd prefer. I'd prefer him to pick those players. I don't think he'll start Mainu at all. Yeah.
No. I think because of the situation in midfield, I think he has to persevere with Fernandes there, and he needs to keep at it with Ugarte. Look at if he drops Ugarte after that performance last week, he's a hypocrite because he's not dropping Bayindir. He didn't drop Bayindir after the Arsenal Cup. He didn't drop Bayindir after another mistake against Burnley. Yeah, there are players who are playing worse. I'd be really worried for Amorim and for United if, when the teams drop tomorrow, I see Bayindir's name in the lineup and I see Luke Shaw's name in the lineup, because United are not going anywhere with those two players. Luke Shaw, I've interviewed him a few times. Really good interview. He's a nice lad. He's had some very good games for United over the years. He's had the odd very good season as well. But unfortunately for him, his best performance in the last couple of years was probably in that Adidas short film with Barry Keoghan last year. His acting in it was actually very good. But you're not going to get anywhere with him in that team. He's been there. Like Roy Keane was right what he said last week when he said he's been getting away with murder for years. He's in his 12th season at Manchester United. And then you've got Amorim in the summer. And I was alarmed when he said, like, Luke Shaw's world class. I thought, Christ, you really shouldn't be saying that, because that is going to come back to haunt you sooner rather than later. And unfortunately, last week, in the biggest game so far this season, it did.
We'll just end the podcast with a nod to yourself, Samuel, because there's been some late transfer news. You are leaving the Manchester Evening News. From a personal perspective, I'll be very sad to see you go. It's been a pleasure working with you. I think I first met you in 2018, didn't I? When I came onto the desk to do some work experience, and I've known you since then. And I've obviously worked very closely with you over the last couple of years. And you've had the pleasure of traveling with me during long car journeys, which you've done very well to put up with us. You arrived at the MEN in 2014, Samuel, as a digital reporter, and then you moved into your United writer role, and then you became chief writer in 2017. You've had a fantastic innings. I think your coverage has been outstanding. Everyone would agree with that. And like I say, I'll be sad to see you go. Do you want to reflect on your last 11 years in a space of a few minutes? Have you got any words to say?
Well, that's very kind of you, and you were, and I don't say this with any biased nature whatsoever, but you were by far and away the best work experience that we had in the office. There were some real disasters at times in terms of work experiences, but you were by far the way of getting that right blend of being inquisitive, curious, hardworking, and chatty, but not too chatty. I think since you got a job, you've become even chattier, so you've made up for it since then. But yeah, I think my last game tomorrow will be exactly 10 years and 11 months since I first came into the office at Chadderton and was rather sheepishly waiting around to be chaperoned to the football desk, which, like it is now, unfortunately, is depleted. But it was only depleted that day because United were playing in the evening, and what I was, people may find this hard to believe, but when I was a member of United as a schoolboy in the 2003-04 membership package that came through, there was a mock newspaper headline that arrived, and the headline said Samuel Luckhurst signs for champions. So if you remember, it was just your name and it was signs for champions. That was the memento from that year's welcome pack. And the masthead was the Manchester Evening News. So it was the first time my name appeared in the MEN, I suppose you could say. I was certainly never ever good enough to play for my local team, Sheppey United. Unlike my granddad and my uncle, never mind Manchester United. But the next best thing was to write about them, and that's been something that I've wanted to do ever since I was 8, and my grandpa buying a newspaper every day and me reading the sports pages and reading up on the football and thinking that seems like an absolute dream job. And the MEN has been the perfect platform for that. Although it's a regional newspaper, its reach is global, and I've discovered that going to the United States, going to Thailand, to Australia, to Kuala Lumpur, all these places where people read our coverage. They read the MEN, and the MEN's association with United goes back several decades, and it's been a genuine privilege to have occupied a role that was made prestigious by Tom Jackson and David Meek. So to have followed in their footsteps, it's not something that I ever imagined I'd have the honour of doing, but to have done it has been wonderful. And it's just I think Sir Alex Ferguson said it years ago that us journalists we feed off United, and we do. It's a captivating role to undertake. It's not completely devoid of its stresses, but by and large, it is extremely enjoyable, and nothing will be massively changing for me going forward. But it is genuinely. I'm sad to be leaving the MEN because I do care about it a hell of a lot, and I know I'm not from Manchester as people will have cottoned on years ago on going off my accent, but I've been living up here for nearly 11 years now, and I imagine I'll be living here for the foreseeable as well. And it's a city, it's a newspaper that I'll always care very, very deeply about. And the good people at the MEN, I wish all of them the best. And it's been great having your company on trips and sitting next to you in the press box. Rich Fay, Charlotte Dunker, Tyrone Marshall, James Robson, all have been. You've all been terrific to be on the road with, to be sat next to be flying with, to be on tour with. And Sarah Lester, the editor, she gave me the job. I owe her a hell of a lot. She's been championing me for pretty much the entirety of my time at the MEN. And Ross Jackson, the incumbent football editor, has been an invaluable sounding board during a difficult time. I think it's safe to say it's been pretty fraught 18 months, an unstable time for us, but we've done a bloody good job of covering United during that time. And Liam Corliss, when he was the main man during the pandemic, really, during that 2021 season, doing covering for Alison McKeegan while she was on maternity leave. He did really, really well in really invidious circumstances that weren't appreciated by people who were above him, unfortunately. And of course, Alice, who is at the BBC now, was just a great boss, and I think we would all share that view. And she did a phenomenal job of helping to transform the identity and the perception of the MEN's coverage of United, and that will be something that I'll always be proud of. I think going into the MEN, I had an idea of what was needed and how it had to change, and I think collectively we built it up into something that was the authority on United and a go-to place for United coverage. So it's been a genuinely, I know I've rambled on a little bit too much here, but it's been great being part of the MEN, to have represented the MEN, and I've enjoyed these podcasts as well. So I will miss doing these. So best of luck to you and everyone left on the desk.
Some brilliant words, mate. We'll miss you. The coverage will miss you. The podcast will miss you. You'll be able to follow Samuel's work still. He will announce in due course where he's off to, but just check his social media in the next few days. Thanks as usual for Samuel one last time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And thanks to listeners. We'll be back after the weekend to reflect on the performance. Take care.